When we sit down to watch a movie, we're pretty locked into the version that the filmmakers have decided to make, or the studios. But there are films that were tweaked and altered for other countries around the world. Whether it was a language barrier or a cultural thing, these animators went above and beyond and altered things for other cultures around the world. Before we get started, be sure to click on that subscribe button for more great content from Screen Rant every single day, right on your homepage.
These are my kind of people.
Inside Out. Inside Out was an immensely successful and beloved film by Pixar, an original concept that seemed to come out of nowhere. Set in the mind of a young girl, we get to see how her emotions interact inside her head and what happens when they don't work seamlessly together. Unsurprisingly, though, is that the film made a few changes for international audiences. One was specifically for the Japanese. When Riley is a baby, her father feeds her broccoli in every country around the world, except for Japan, where she is instead fed green peppers. This was done because bell peppers are considered even more disgusting there compared to broccoli.
Roger that.
Planes. While nowhere near as successful or as beloved as its sister franchise Cars, the team that worked on Planes at least tried to make a few changes to appeal more to the international audiences who might be watching their film. In the film, the character Rochelle is generally depicted as Canadian in the North American release, but her nationality and paint job was changed for 11 other regions around the world. She even gets new names in certain regions, such as Carolina in Brazil and Tanya in Russia. She ended up staying as Rochelle in Australia and New Zealand, though, despite losing her Canadian identity from the original cut. Monsters University. Despite being the most common and one of the most accessible languages on the planet, not everyone speaks or understands English, contrary to what others might think. That may have been a problem for some films, but the team who worked on Monsters University saw this as an opportunity to flex their animation muscles. In the film, a set of cupcakes spell out "Be my pal" in the English version, but that phrase, which eventually turns into a joke when the cupcakes spell out the word "lame" on Randall's eyes, wouldn't work in a country that doesn't speak English, so they were changed to happy faces. No clever joke this time, but no confusion either.
What do you call a three-humped camel?
I don't know. What do you call
three-humped camel?
Zootopia. When it comes to altering scenes for the rest of the world, Zootopia probably picks up the prize. It's one thing to alter a scene here and there for the rest of the world or one specific country, but what about a whole bunch of different countries? In the film, a news story breaks out, but depending on which country you saw the film in, this scene will look a little bit different. The animal anchors depict the best-known animals from certain countries, such as a moose in Canada, a koala in Australia, a jaguar in Brazil, and a panda in China. Talk about going above and beyond.
How could you not know this?
I am a figment of your imagination. You did not know, how could I?
Ratatouille. It's quite often the little details that go unnoticed until someone on the internet points them out for the masses. Case in point, a cool little scene in the beloved Brad Bird film Ratatouille. The film is set entirely in France, but all the characters speak English in the original version. But they also write in English, which isn't handy for those living in France. So what did Pixar do? Well, they redid a scene with Remy reading a letter, of course. The French version of the film was redone so the letter reads in their native tongue and not the original English text. Up. As mentioned before, the English language is one of the biggest barriers for international audiences. It's even harder for those countries that don't even use a Latin alphabet, such as Russia or Japan. But Pixar is extremely aware of this and actively implements small changes into their films to accommodate non-English speaking fans. Case in point, a small jar in Up that reads Paradise Falls. The jar was used to save up funds for a trip to the falls, but if you can't read English, you wouldn't get it. So the animators at Pixar swapped out the word and gave audiences a hand-drawn picture of the falls to convey the message. Wreck-It Ralph. Ralph Breaks the Internet is just around the corner, and we're incredibly excited for it. We have to wonder if that film will change certain moments for audiences around the world. After all, it is dealing with the internet culture, and that's going to vary from country to country. One thing that was changed in the first film, though, was the Sugar Rush character, Mintizaki. Named after the legendary filmmaker Hayao Miyazaki, she was altered completely for reasons unknown in the Japanese release of the film. Instead, she's now a fair-skinned, green-haired, kimono-sporting girl named Minty Sakura. It's a blink and you'll miss it moment, but one has to wonder why it was done.
It's too fast! How could you even tell what's on? I can tell.
Toy Story 2. Most of the films on this list are fairly recent, which demonstrates that the act of altering one's movie for international audiences is a relatively new thing when it comes to animated films. But despite that, Toy Story 2 was changing the game way before the rest of them. After Woody goes missing, Buzz gives an inspiring speech to the rest of the other toys to help him find their friend. In the United States, this speech is given with the American Star-Spangled Banner in the background, accompanied by the national anthem. Internationally, it's a globe set to one world anthem.
Don't worry, Smoothie.
Squishy!
Squishy. We're not gonna lose, because we have everything we need to win right here.
Monsters University. Many studios would not even bother making any alterations to their scenes, at the cost of alienating some fans. Thankfully, Pixar is on point when it came to a giant verbal sign in Monsters University. In the film, students at the university compete in scare games, complete with a giant spray-painted decal on the wall of the arena. But that would mean nothing to foreign audiences, so the animators decide to completely remove the words and replace them with the university's crest. It's these small steps that really make the film better for everybody.
What is their problem? I've got a great idea! Did you even read?
Inside Out. As mentioned earlier, Inside Out is one of those films that made a few changes to their movie. Changing a vegetable is one thing. It's a simple matter of replacing the objects in the scene. But how about replacing a whole entire set of animations for a brief scene? As Riley's dad daydreams at one point in the film, we see him fantasizing about a hockey game. But hockey isn't as popular in other countries around the world as it is in the States and Canada. So the animators changed this entire scene to be a soccer match, which is considered to be the world sport. Now that's dedication.
Whatever.
Iron Man 3, Chinese version. Iron Man 3, released in 2013, is a co-production between Marvel Studios and China-based DMG Entertainment. The Chinese version of the film included some new scenes that weren't in the US version. The character Dr. Wu, who was introduced in the beginning of the movie, is expanded upon and given additional scenes in the Chinese version. Overall, there is roughly 4 minutes of footage that was added. There's also a new scene that features Iron Man with middle school students that can be seen in a news report. They even went as far as putting product placement from Guli Duo, which is a popular milk brand in China. Iron Man 3 was well liked by many fans, especially after the sequel was a bit of a disappointment. It did great in the box office and grossed over $408 million. Remember, Iron Man 3 was released a year after The Avengers, and a lot of people were hyped after that movie. Iron Man 3 had a better story and was more direct than the sequel, and the focus wasn't so much on explosions and heavy effects. Of course, Stark's wisecracks are another big selling point of the franchise and keep the movie entertaining. Pirates of the Caribbean, At World's End, Chinese Pirate Captain. Pirates of the Caribbean is one of Disney's biggest movie franchises. Everyone loves when Johnny Depp graces the screen as his character, Captain Jack Sparrow. From the time we first saw him on screen in the role, it was a hit. In Pirates of the Caribbean, At World's End, one character did not have as much screen time in China as the US. It was one of their biggest stars, Chow Yun-fat, who played the pirate captain Sao Fang. While he had about 20 minutes of screen time in the US, it was cut in half in China. A lot of his scenes were cut from this movie because, according to officials, his character was an insulting racial caricature. One scene that was cut involved Sao Fang reciting a famous Chinese poem to the heroine who he falls in love with at first sight. There were also protests from Singapore after Chow had a line saying, "Welcome to Singapore."
Captain Barbossa, welcome to Singapore.
It hinted at Singapore being a land of pirates and caused a number of people to be upset. Chow Yun-fat is a great actor, and despite some racial controversy, it's a shame he didn't get all of his screen time in his home country.
You son of a bitch! Goddamn!
Lincoln, history lesson. The hat, the beard, the face on our penny and $5 bill. Who doesn't know Abraham Lincoln, right? Well, people who aren't from the United States don't. When Steven Spielberg's movie, Lincoln, was getting ready for its international release, research showed that almost everyone has heard of President Lincoln, but they don't know exactly why he's played such a big role in our country's history. Luckily, Spielberg was kind enough to provide audiences with a little cheat sheet who weren't familiar with Abraham Lincoln. Most countries received an all-new intro, explaining the Civil War and its context against black and white images, and the John Williams score playing over it. For the Japanese release, release, Spielberg took it up a notch and decided to appear on screen himself to give the country a history lesson on the US. It's a great part of our country's history, and it's pretty cool that Spielberg went to such great lengths so audiences could understand what was going on during that time period. Films about American history have always had a hard time overseas, and one reason Spielberg wanted to add in the extras toward the beginning of the film. It ended up doing pretty well, and made $93 million overseas.
Here's Johnny.
The Shining, typewriter scene. Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, based on Stephen King's book of the same name, is one of his most recognized films. Kubrick has been known for many things, but being relaxed isn't one of them. He was very particular about how he wanted his movies to be. He would routinely force dozens of takes for scenes that didn't really matter until the actors got them just right and he felt good about it inside. Kubrick's OCD went in full effect when he felt that the typewriting scene of Jack Torrance's masterpiece would be diminished if foreign viewers had to read in subtitles what all the pages said. The words could have easily been translated into other languages, but the sayings themselves only exist in English, so it would lose a lot of its context and meaning. Kubrick's secretary went through a lot just to create one manuscript for the American version. Imagine what she went through when she had to redo it a handful of times for international versions of the movie, which all contained a real saying from each particular country. It's understandable to want things to be just right and how you picture them, but Kubrick is in a whole other realm as far as his OCD goes. Captain America: The Winter Soldier. To-do list. If you were Captain America, there would be a lot to be curious about after being trapped underneath the ice for so long. After all, you'd be 90 years old and wonder what the heck happened the last 7 decades. So much to see and do, and so little time. How much downtime does the Cap really have when he's not saving the world from annihilation? If you remember, Captain America has a to-do list during one scene in The Winter Soldier. It's filled with things he deems necessary to catch up on. Movies, events, music, and Steve Jobs, of course. However, if you saw the movie outside of the United States, you would see a few discrepancies on the list. For example, Steve, who lives across the pond, needs to research The Beatles, the TV show Sherlock, and Sean Connery. French Steve needs to listen to Daft Punk and watch The Fifth Element. You'd think the list would be a little bit bigger than that, but maybe the Cap has been doing a lot with his downtime. He owes it to himself to get up to speed with all that happened over the years. It'd be funny in a future movie if he brings up to a fellow Avenger something he crossed off on his list.
I am Groot.
Save them? How?
I am Groot.
Guardians of the Galaxy. I am Groot. Groot from Guardians of the Galaxy is one of the most complex and demanding characters Vin Diesel has played, even if he only ever says 3 words. Diesel had to stand there and carefully consider how Groot would deliver his line, I am Groot. Now, it was probably already a long enough process to do this in English. Diesel eventually had to do the entire process again, 15 different times, one for each additional language. To make it easier for foreign fans that he was still Groot, Diesel had to redub his line in a different language for each international version. Diesel is a dedicated actor and learned how to say I am Groot in Hungarian, Hindi, Czech, Polish, Portuguese, Spanish, Ukrainian, Mandarin, Japanese, French, Italian, Kazakh, German, Russian, and of course, English.
Ich bin Groot.
Nein!
Diesel may have been constantly looking at a script, but even after the movie was completed, he was still able to remember a lot of his non-English lines. Jimmy Fallon put him on the spot, and Diesel was able to deliver. Groot has become a fan-favorite character for obvious reasons, and has captured a lot of our hearts. We're looking forward to what teenage Groot is like after seeing a glimpse of him at the end of the movie.
Shrek 2. Shrek 2 is the brilliant 2004 DreamWorks animation sequel to 2001's even more brilliant Shrek movie. It had a truly tremendous voice cast that was jam-packed with major stars from around the world. We all know, for example, that Mike Myers voiced the titular Green Ogre, that Eddie Murphy voiced his donkey friend, that Cameron Diaz voiced Princess Fiona, and that Julie Andrews voiced Queen Lillian, and so forth. But there were a couple of characters in the movie who were voiced by different people depending on the country in which it was being shown. Those being Doris the Ugly Stepsister and the Red Carpet Announcer. Doris the Ugly Stepsister was voiced by 2 different iconic talk show hosts in the United States and the United Kingdom versions of the movie. Those being Larry King in the United States version and Jonathan Ross in the United Kingdom version, respectively. And the Red Carpet Announcer at the Far, Far Away Royal Ball in the movie was voiced by the late, great, legendary, and truly hilarious comedian Joan Rivers in the United States version of the movie, and the former host of The X Factor, Kate Thornton, in the United Kingdom version of the movie.
Hello? Is this Lightning McQueen, the world's fastest racing machine? Is this Harv, the world's greatest agent?
Cars. 2006's Cars movie is a brilliant offering from the always fantastic Pixar Animation Studios. It quite famously utilizes the voice talents of the likes of Owen Wilson as the main character Lightning McQueen, Paul Newman as Doc Hudson, Larry the Cable Guy as Mater, and Bonnie Hunt as Sally Carrera. But there is one character in the movie who is voiced by two different people depending on which country the movie is being shown. The character in question is Harv, Lightning McQueen's agent, who is never actually seen on screen. In the UK version of the movie, Harv is voiced by the controversial television host Jeremy Clarkson. This makes sense because Clarkson was famously the lead host of BBC show Top Gear, which focuses on cars, and he currently hosts the Grand Tour on Amazon Prime, which is a very similar show. In the general release version of the movie, however, Harv is voiced by American actor Jeremy Piven, who has no such explicit link to the world of the automotive industry. Red Dawn. Red Dawn is a 2012 war movie that you may or may not have heard of, as it didn't exactly perform brilliantly at the box office. It was also pretty terrible, but that's a discussion for another time and place. It did, however, have a pretty impressive ensemble cast, including the likes of Chris Hemsworth, Josh Peck, Josh Hutcherson, Adrian Palicki, Isabel Lucas, and Negan himself, Jeffrey Dean Morgan. The movie's plot originally revolved around a group of young people defending their hometown from a Chinese invasion. However, in post-production, the movie's villains were changed from being Chinese to being North Korean, in order to increase the movie's chances of success in the Chinese market. It is, therefore, very different to the other entries in this video, as the movie was changed entirely, not just for one country, but the fact that it was changed in order to cater to one country in particular makes it eligible for inclusion. Editing occurred that changed Chinese flags to North Korean flags. Several scenes were completely re-edited, and the film's opening scene was reworked completely, with its original story of the Chinese government invading the United States to forcefully collect a debt after the country defaulted on its loans being dropped. Moana. The 2016 Walt Disney Animation Studios movie saw the titular character Moana, who heads off on a journey of discovery with the demigod Maui, who is voiced by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
You know, Maui is the hero to all. You're doing great.
The titular character had to be renamed for the movie's release in certain countries, however, which resulted in the name of the movie itself having to be changed as well. In Italy, Moana had to be renamed because there already is a very famous Moana there, the late Moana Pozzi. Believe it or not, Pozzi was an adult film actress who passed away in 1994, but she was incredibly popular in the mainstream and even starred in her own animated movie called Moana Land, in which she fought against the corruption in Italian politics. In order to distinguish this children's movie from the adult industry, the name change was essential. In a number of other European countries such as Spain and Romania, however, the title and titular character of Moana needed to be changed for another reason. There was a copyright clash over the word Moana, as it is a brand name, so the movie is known as Vaiana. Harry Potter. The Harry Potter movie franchise, which was, of course, based on English author J.K. Rowling's hugely successful series of books, is one of the most successful movie franchises of all time, both critically and commercially. One of the most beloved characters in the franchise is undoubtedly Hermione Granger, who is so brilliantly portrayed by the fantastic Emma Watson. In the Netherlands, however, fans of the series know Hermione Granger by a different name, Hermelijn Griefeld. The name Hermelijn was used for pronunciation reasons, but Griefeld was used because it relates so well to Hermione's character. You see, in the Dutch language, a Griefeld is a pen that was once used in schools to write on slate. When somebody was rewarded with a Griefeld, it meant they had performed a task incredibly well, which suits Hermione, or Hermelijn, as the case in the Netherlands, as she is an exceptionally talented witch who always achieved highly at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry and was one of the establishment's better students. Swallows and Amazons. Swallows and Amazons was an extremely popular 1930 children's novel that was written by English author Arthur Ransome. In 2016, it was turned into a movie, but one character's name had to be changed. It would have caused too many snickers in other English-speaking countries around the world. The original story had a character in it called Titty Walker, who was based on a real woman who went by the name of Mavis Titty Altunyan. Obviously, that name has a certain connotations that render it unsuitable for audiences in the United States.
I'm Able Seaman Tatty Walker, aged 9½.
But the change didn't come without controversy. Barbara Altunyan, the niece of Mavis Titty Altunyan, said that her aunt would be turning in her grave at the alteration and said that the rest of her family were absolutely furious that the name had been changed. However, Sophie Neville, who played Titty Walker in the previous movie adaptation of Swallows and Amazons in 1974 and is the current president of the Arthur Ransome Society, reluctantly admitted that the change was necessary. She said, for those to be financed, we need to think about the reaction of international audiences. We might have to pay the price by changing Titty's name. Well, that's it for today. Have you noticed an international change to an animated movie before? Do you think this is a practice that other studios should adopt? Do you think that one day we'll have completely different looking versions of films in different countries? Let us know in the comments below, and be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel to get more videos just like this in your playlist every day. Thanks for watching.